as already mentioned, today we're going to talk about a little bit more about using HCP Waypoint and what that is actually. So before we kind of dive into it, for everybody that's ever had to deal with any kind of servers or infrastructure, you're probably familiar with the kind of the mess that it comes with it, usually, if you're not kind of specifically taken care of. And you've probably seen that image like multiple times already. And I don't really want to pick up on the cloud native here, but that's probably the picture that illustrates the situation we're in nowadays with the cloud native landscape, where there are millions of tools, complexity just rising through the roof, and it really reflects how we are kind of fragmented and how it can actually go out of proportion quite easily if there isn't kind of any kind of standardization or higher level of abstraction available for you. And I think that kind of really kind of shows what kind of tooling we actually need nowadays. And I believe that Waypoint, specifically HCP Waypoint, is definitely trying to address that issue, where it tries to alleviate and remove some of the complexity from everyday kind of workflow from developers as well. So without further ado, let's move forward. So quickly, slightly about who am I? I am a head of consultancy at the Scale Factory. We're a B2B SaaS consultancy. My background is mainly ops. So throughout my career, I wore many hats, but regardless what kind of role I've been in, I was always somehow connected with open source. So it's one of my two big passions, which are open source and also the automation. And I believe those two things go quite nicely together. I'm an active open source contributor, maintainer, and supporter. I'm also one of the HashiCorp ambassadors. When I'm not doing all those things, I really enjoy hiking and traveling, which we can actually do that now more of. So yeah. Cool. Let's start first with just quickly covering what Waypoint actually is. And we're going to start with the Waypoint open source product, which is a kind of a single binary, which literally is trying to simplify the development workflows. And it has a single point of interaction. It kind of helps you to kind of cover all the software development lifecycle from the developer perspective, and helps you kind of to abstract all the necessary nitty-gritty things that you don't want to deal with as a developer on a daily basis. It consists mainly of three components. So there is a server part of it, there is a UI, and there are runners. So you can, with the OSS variant, this comes all within one binary, so you don't have to deal with all different things. So it's very simple to set up. It's trying to kind of contribute to and ensure, while you're doing this, that you have a better consistency when you're deploying your applications out to infrastructure. It tries to raise your level of confidence when you're doing it. So you don't have to deal with all different kind of bits of your workflow where something would randomly break, or maybe in opposite direction. Works on my machine, right? And then when you deploy it somewhere, it obviously stops working. And as most of the Hashi stack, it has a really extensible ecosystem. So it does support plugins natively, where you can either go and write your own, or use one of already available plugins that helps you deliver your application to the target infrastructure. And it's all doing it so by actually abstracting development lifecycle using HCL v2, which we all kind of love and use on a daily basis, especially if you are embedded in the Hashi stack already and you're already using one of the tools. They're mostly kind of using HashiCorp configuration language, which is quite nicely readable and quite easily understandable, even if you don't have massive amount of experience with it. So that was kind of Waypoint OSS version. So if we kind of switch gears a bit and look how the delivery workflow would look like for a very typical application delivery, I do understand there are kind of different aspects to it. So for example, the image that I'm showing, it's probably missing all the testing, and probably all the security scanning and all the things that you could do as part of that. But let's for now just focus on the build, deploy, and release kind of phases of it. And in a most typical environment, what would you do as part of the build phase is, you would need to kind of make sure that there is a Docker file that kind of ensures that all the dependencies are nicely packaged. If you're kind of deploying things as containers, then there are probably a bunch of scripts that you need to pack in as well in order to ensure that everything is put in the right place, the permissions are set, and everything is set to be deployed. And if you're deploying things to, a container orchestrator in this sense, you probably need to come up with manifests that actually describe how your application is going to be deployed somewhere, how it interacts. And then as a release phase, you need to specify and probably define how you're going to expose that service publicly or privately somewhere. And also you need to kind of update DNS records, update probably like web server configurations, manage different kind of encryption keys or SSL certificates. So it does involve a lot of kind of moving parts. And to be honest, it is quite complex, right? If you're coming into this space, the learning curve is quite steep and definitely doesn't help kind of bringing new talent in. So, kind of looking at those three phases, I think some really smart people at HashiCorp actually start thinking like what we can do to kind of maybe simplify that or make it slightly easier, right? And, they came up with Waypoint. And what Waypoint does is, on one side, you would have developers, the source code, which might not be committed to a versioning system. And then you have a manifest, which is written in HashiCorp configuration language that kind of describes all those three phases: build, deploy, and release. And it kind of abstracts and alleviates all the kind of details about how you build, deploy, and release your application. Because, in a traditional way, that would usually involve a lot of different teams. So it usually have a team to provision your infrastructure, for example, a team that deals with platform and infrastructure as a code. Then there would be a team for, setting up networking and, ensuring that there is connectivity between all the services. And then, of course, there is a security team and compliance team, which ensures that everything that you deliver and ship is safe and, production ready. So this is kind of, what Waypoint is trying to address. And kind of the basic idea is, if we boil it down to, you can literally run a command, Waypoint up, and Waypoint will take the manifest, make sure that all the bits are properly executed. And as part of that, at the end of that command, you would actually end up with your application deployed in an infrastructure somewhere, released and available for you to test or use in production. So that kind of describes the whole Waypoint lifecycle. So let's maybe take a step back and quickly have a look what the HCP platform is. So HCP platform is HashiCorp, a fully managed SaaS solution. It offers almost all products as a service. So on the platform, you can actually now, if you go there, you can actually get Vault, Console, Packer, Boundary as services, fully managed services, and you don't have to manage the infrastructure needed to run those. And we also have Waypoint there. Full disclaimer, it's still in beta, so there might be some functionality missing compared to Waypoint OSS, but we'll cover that later as we go along. And of course, Terraform Cloud is a separate product from historic reasons, where this was the first one that made it into the fully managed SaaS solution. But that's a separate thing, even though you would find a link on the HashiCorp platform to kind of so you can be redirected automatically there. What probably the biggest advantage of the platform is, it's a cross-cloud unified workflow. So it does incorporate all the Hashi stack in one place and enables you to kind of deploy and interact with different cloud backends as you deploy things. So it does have a hybrid multi-cloud native support out of the box. And, following all the Gartner research and all the kind of industry direction, it seems like we're kind of heading towards that way. So, it's kind of preparing you for that new world that we're kind of facing nowadays. And it does offer single bottle deployment. So that means that there is a really, really kind of high level abstracted workflow which you can use. And it will do those things together, where you can interact with different services and use them by just, pressing a button of deploy. So if we look where Waypoint kind of fits into the HCP story is kind of, if you look back compared to what we said about the OSS version, we mentioned there is a server component, there is an UI component, there is a runner. And if we look at the architectural diagram of how that looks like within the HashiCorp Cloud Platform, is HCP Waypoint actually employs the following workflow. So firstly, HCP Waypoint CLI, or you use HCP Waypoint CLI or UI to kind of issue commands and communicate with a server, which is managed and operated by the HashiCorp Cloud Platform. Then the server would provide the UU component as well. So that is fully hosted as well, so you don't have to run that. And then the server assigns jobs that you kind of submitted to the Waypoint runners, which you run on your own infrastructure. So obviously that needs access to all the resources that you're interacting with or using as part of your deployment. And then the Waypoint would also provide a custom entry point binary, which is automatically injected into the build phase. So it provides live streaming of logs and fetching the config from the platform directly without needing to kind of interact with your application or kind of connecting to your, for example, container somewhere in order to debug it or kind of fetch logs. So in a nutshell, it would provide you a consistent end-to-end deployment experience, and it would enable you to build your application and push it to a registry, which would usually live somewhere outside the platform as well. And it will ensure that your infrastructure is kind of deployed necessary as your application needs it. So it kind of automates that bit. And at the last stage, it kind of makes sure that the application that you're delivering is successfully released and published and available to you for either testing, or if you're pushing it to production environment, for production use as well. Probably the main benefits, in terms of key concepts are probably the automation, visibility, security, and kind of centrally control access. And that's kind of incorporated by HCP Waypoint by defining different contexts within you can operate in. You can define your projects, which can consist of one or many applications. In a similar way that you might be using input variables from, for example, Terraform, you can kind of set those as well and dynamically inject them from the platform, or maybe from, you can actually use integration with something like Vault, and you can dynamically inject secrets into it as well. And then, of course, in the settings section, you can actually kind of hook it up to your Git repo and enable triggering on changes based from your VCS system. So, for example, you can automate the workflow in terms of if a developer or me as a developer push something to the Git repo, that will automatically trigger the workflow and kind of deploy my application to the target environment. Right. So let's quickly have a look at the example of the Waypoint manifest. So this would be like a very typical Waypoint HCL configuration file. So as I said before, first, obviously, we have to pick a project. I haven't been using a lot of imagination here. So my project in this case is currently called just a deployer. Then within the project, I would define app or multiple apps. So in this case, I'm going to call my app web. And you can obviously set some labels on it. And then, as I said before, we need to kind of cover all the phases of application delivery and kind of define what we're going to do in each phase. So if we look at the first phase here, it's a build phase. What we're actually saying here is we're going to use a Docker plugin. By a plugin, I mean the build phase is going to ensure that the Docker will be used to build my application, and that will be done locally. As part of the build phase, we will also push the Docker image out to a registry, And in our case, we're using AWS ECR, where we can set things like region, name of the repository, and a specific tag on it. And that kind of, wraps up the whole build phase. We're going to see later on how that actually looks like. So after we kind of finish looking at the example manifest, we're going to switch kind of into the demo, live demo, and hopefully the demo gods are with us, and we're going to see that in action. The next phase here, for example, is I'm going to use Kubernetes to deploy my container to. And there are things you can set on the Kubernetes deployment as well. So for example, I can say what the prod path is. So this means where it's going to check for health monitoring. I can set how many replicas I want to run. I can define which service port I'm using, and something similar for release as well. So obviously I'm going to release it using Kubernetes as well. And in order to release it, I actually want to use a load balancer and expose my service on the port 80 publicly. And like I mentioned before, you can use variables as well. So without any further ado, let's quickly jump into a demo and see how that actually works, how that actually looks like. So let me quickly start. So I'm already logged into the HCP platform. And we're going to quickly switch to the Waypoint. As I mentioned before, it's still beta, so there might be some features that you might miss compared to the OSS version, but it will kind of do the trick. So firstly, if we look, I don't have any projects defined yet, and I don't have any runners defined. So let's first go ahead and maybe create a runner, right? So what I'm going to do here is just to show you, I'm actually running a vanilla empty EKS cluster in AWS environment. And it's a really, most typical 3-node cluster. There is nothing running in it except the only thing that I deployed was the EBS CSS controllers. So when I install my runner, so let's go ahead and I'm going to install my runner. So how to install a runner is you literally call the same binary again, Waypoint, and you say you use the runner command and you say install. And what I want to do here is I'm going to say I want to install it to a Kubernetes platform. I want to connect it to my Waypoint server, which is hosted in HCP Waypoint. And the address is api.hashicorp.cloud. And I want to use a specific Kubernetes runner image, which is actually an official HashiCorp Waypoint latest image. So let's go ahead and install that runner. And what that is doing actually is connecting to my Kubernetes cluster. It's installing the Waypoint Helm chart using a specific image. And it's kind of injecting a specific variable where it needs to connect to, so where it will find its server and receive commands from. So let's give it a couple of more seconds. It should finish in a bit. Here we go. So if we have a look how that looks like, you're going to notice there is a new pod running. So what it did is actually deploy the deployment, which deployed my Waypoint pod, which is going to serve us as a runner. So if we switch back to the platform, you're going to notice that I have a runner available now. So there is a runner ready to receive my commands. It's all set. And the next thing we want to do is actually set up a project. So if I switch back to my console, what we're going to do here is, because I really like Terraform, what I'm using here is I'm just going to use Terraform to provision my my project actually. Just heads up, there isn't an official Waypoint provider yet, but I'm actually using the one created by HashiCorp Development Advocates. It's not an official one, but it's kind of doing the job that I wanted to do. So it's a very simple couple of resources that it supports. So it definitely supports Waypoint projects. I'm just going to give it a deploy. You set a project name. I don't want to use remote runners for now. When I say remote runners, that means that I'm not setting that currently, but I'm going to use my local runner in my Kubernetes cluster. Then you can actually hook it up to data resource. In this case, I'm just hooking it up to my Git repo, setting which path it's going to trigger from, which reference, and so on. And that if we switch back, you're going to notice that if I click on my projects, there is a project now, which is called a deployer. If I click on it, it's currently empty. But my Terraform actually did set the variable region, which I'm using in my project. And it did set the settings that I kind of showed you earlier. So if we switch back to, as you probably used off, by using Terraform, the first thing we need to do, we need to execute Waypoint init. And what that actually does, it just checks the configuration file and reads it. And actually, if we go back to applications, it creates our application that we defined. So if you click on the application, which is called web, you're going to see we can actually check all the builds we have, releases, we can check the logs. There's nothing there. So let's go ahead and actually execute Waypoint up, right? Because we want to get our application up and running. So as I mentioned before, what it actually does, it actually literally picks my Docker file, which is the local Docker file that I have on my laptop. It picks it up, builds it. As soon as it's built, it injects the Waypoint entry point. So we can actually get the logs on this end. As you can see, the logs already start coming in. So we can actually look at the logs centrally from the HCP Waypoint without kind of needing to interact with Kubernetes at all. So for example, if you can imagine I'm a developer, I don't even probably have access to Kubernetes cluster, or I don't want to have access to Kubernetes cluster. I just want to deploy it somewhere, right? So if you go back, you're going to see the image was built. It was actually pushed to the ECR, and then it was deployed to my Kubernetes cluster in Amazon, in this case, the one that I showed you. And it was released afterwards using the same Kubernetes cluster, creating a service which kind of created load balancer in the background. And as it finished doing it, so it actually shows me the release URL. And if you pay attention to this one, you're gonna quickly notice that this release URL is actually my load balancer URL from my platform. So you can actually see that from the URL that's been posted. So it's amazon.aws.com, and it has the prefix of ELB. So it's just a standard load balancer. So if we actually go ahead, I'm just going to quickly check if the service is up and running. So as you can see, the load balancer was created. It's called the same as my app. And if I quickly go to this URL, you're going to see my app was actually deployed. It's a very simplified app. It just deploys a static Nginx site with some predefined content. And just to show you how that actually looks like when you go ahead and update something in the app, I'm just going to quickly show you if we go to public index HTML. And what we're going to do here is we're going to quickly remove some comments, and we're going to add text hello from HashiTalks 2023. And if we go ahead and save that file, the only thing we have to do in this case is actually just execute Waypoint up again. So it's as simple as that. It's a single command. And you don't have to learn a lot of different runes, but you have to run to make it work. And what it does, it kind of goes through the whole dance again. It would go pick my container, update my content, rebuild it again, push it to the ECR, and communicate with my EKS cluster and say, okay, we have a new build now. Let's go ahead and deploy that. So as you can see in live what it looks like. So the deployment was actually successfully rolled out. It was a rolling deployment. So eventually it should update my deployment. And the release URL is actually exactly the same as we had it the first time around. So it's the same load balancer. It's just kind of pointing to a new release, or the same release that was kind of updated in place. So if I go to this side that I showed you before and I press refresh, you can see the text was actually added, and it says hello from HashiTalks 2023. So it's literally as simple as just running Waypoint up. And everything is fully managed from the central console. You can kind of look at the logs live, so you can see my request was actually received, and it was kind of forwarded to the console. I can also inspect all different resources that were actually deployed. So I have a release, I have a deployment, and my first version was version 1, and I can actually go back and kind of inspect that as well. I can see all the logs and everything that happened. So in case something would break with me releasing a new one, I can actually go back and debug it. And it's really as simple as that. And the only thing that I want to show you is Once you're done, once everything is sorted and kind of works fine, in order to kind of remove that, it kind of works the same way. So you just need to execute waypoint destroy. So it's an opposite command to up. So I'm using an auto approve here. So please don't use that in production. So it's not going to ask you for confirmation. But in this case, I'm fairly sure that I know what I'm doing and this is what I want. So as soon as I execute that, it will actually go and remove my project. So if we go and check the pods, you're going to see there are no deployments here, and we're only left with our runner. And if we want to destroy the project as well, we can do something similar, saying waypoint project destroy. In this case, I need to confirm it. I need to go ahead and just connect to the platform, say, okay, we don't need that project anymore, just going to remove it. And as you can see here, boom, it's gone. And the only thing left to kind of clean up is the runner. Just quickly show you how that works. So we can uninstall the runner in a similar manner by just executing waypoint runner uninstall in a platform Kubernetes. And we just need to specify the ID of a runner. It will go connect to my backend, which is Kubernetes. It will uninstall the Helm chart. The runner will be uninstalled. It removes all the PVC volumes that were used. And if we check the pods, you're going to see the cluster is empty again. And moving here, you're going to see the runner disappears from the platform as well. Okay, so that was the demo. Let's quickly resume the presentation just to kind of quickly wrap it up. So just to wrap it up, as we all know, application delivery is really hard, and to be honest, nobody really wants to deal with all the nitty-gritty details, managing all different scripts or configuration files, millions of them. So it's definitely something we want to abstract away, especially from developers that maybe don't come from the infrastructure background. The key advantages are it offers you a flexible platform, it lowers complexity and kind of rises up the level of abstraction. So you don't have to know about all the details for building, releasing, and deploying your application. HCP platform comes as a managed service, so you don't have to take care of running a service and make sure that's up and running whenever somebody wants to deploy something. There are a couple of really exciting things coming up in the future on the roadmap. So there are custom pipelines coming up. So that will offer you slightly more flexibility in the way how the pipelines are defined. You can actually extend it by adding additional steps, such as testing, security scanning, or things like that. And there are workflow templates coming as well. So you will be able to define your workflow templates and kind of disseminate that as a master template for people using it. And just a couple of things to keep in mind before we finish here is there is a limited features available to the HCP Waypoint. So currently it doesn't support exec functionality, so you cannot exec into your workloads at this point. It doesn't offer trigger URLs or URL service. So as you've seen, I've received my load balancer URL, but I cannot hook it up to a custom URLs. So if you're familiar with OSS variant, by default, it will give you a URL service where you would end up with generated name .waypoint.run, or you can provide your own. And currently supported platforms are Docker, Kubernetes, AWS, ECS, and Nomad, but there are more to come. And again, it's currently in beta, so the updates can happen at any time at the platform. So it's not recommended to use it in production just yet, but I would definitely encourage you to go ahead and kind of test it out and see how it works. I would definitely say it should work fine for any kind of development life cycles. So it doesn't come with any kind of SLAs or commitments from HashiCorp at this point, and it's currently used at best effort. But as soon as it graduates out of beta, it should be fully ready for production use. Please go ahead and look at the repo. It's an open source product, Waypoint. Check the issues and please do contribute. This is how we're making our communities stronger and stronger. So yeah, thank you for that. Please do keep in touch. Use any kind of social platforms to reach out, or I'll be hanging out at the YouTube stream after this talk as well. So thank you.